All right, so I'm Trevor Hubbs, the Armed Forces Initiative Coordinator for Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. This is part 5 of our career series focused on veterans and active duty military getting into the outdoor space. We've talked to guides, we've talked to manufacturers. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the photography and writing space. So, Justin Townsend, writer for Mediator, professional chef, active duty Coast Guard. He's got a whole resume he can probably talk to you about, but he's going to be the host tonight. He's talking to Pat Durkin and DJ Struntz, who are Pat is also a writer for Mediator, and DJ is a professional photographer, primarily in like the spearfishing and surfing world, if I understand correctly. But we'll hear more about him in a second. Take it away, Justin.
Hey, how's it going? Excuse me. It's a great way to start off a conversation with a cough. But so thanks everybody for joining us tonight. So as Trevor mentioned, my name's Justin Townsend. So in addition to being an active duty officer in the Coast Guard, I have worked in a variety of roles and continue to start off as a professional chef back in college about 12 or so years ago, and have then turned it into sort of a writing career. Founded my company Harvesting Nature back in 2011, which has turned into kind of an online wild food media company, podcast, cookbooks, magazines, all those things. Still very much growing, but doing a great job at it. So happy to be on the call tonight with everyone and get the opportunity to host with some very awesome and legendary individuals that get to tell you a little bit about their story. So tonight's really a focus to continue on our career series. And, as you may have picked up, we're going to work closely within the writing and photography areas of the outdoor industry. And just like in the previous sessions, we're going to get a little bit of insight about what it takes to break into these types of careers and what it takes to succeed once you're there. So I want you to introduce you to tonight's guest. Trevor did briefly, but I'll go a little bit more. So Pat Durkin and DJ Struntz. So Pat's an award-winning outdoor writer, newspaper columnist, and general outdoors reporter. He's been Mediator's wildlife research contributor since June of 2018 and writes frequently for the National Archery and Hunting magazines, some of which include American Hunter, Outdoor Life, Bugle, Quality Whitetails, and many, many more. DJ's internationally award-winning photography takes him on adventures around the globe as a staff photographer for Surfing Magazine, Globe International, Hawaii, Skin Diver, and has led to appearances on NBC, CNN, CBS, ABC, and Fox. And he's produced shoots in more than 20 countries, often with minimal resources and critically demanding timelines. So if you guys have questions throughout, please post them in the chat. As we kind of work through our questions here, we'll work to answering yours as well. And as Trevor mentioned, if you have something that popped up that you think everybody will benefit from, please, let us know. Pat, DJ, anything you would like to lead out the gate with that I may have missed in your introduction or prime first words?
Well, not really. I was just, when you said legendary, I knew you weren't talking about me. So that's why you have DJ here.
Well, he would have used infamous if he was talking about me, not legendary. So. I guess my career has kind of diverged a little bit since Surfing Magazine no longer exists. Print magazines have kind of gone the way of the dinosaur, unfortunately, except for some niche ones. So my primary role now is with North American Rescue. So a lot of the military space is probably familiar with a lot of our products, like the cat tourniquet and stuff like that. So I run the social media platforms for that. I still am involved heavily in the photography side. I actually just got in about 10 minutes ago. I just scarfed some food because I've been offshore spearfishing and shooting photos all day for Rife and North American, about 50 miles offshore here of North Carolina. So it's been a busy afternoon.
Nice. Awesome. Well, if you guys don't mind, I'll go into some questions that we kind of had queued up for you, and then we can spawn conversation from there. And please, I'll start off kind of talking to one of you and bounce back and forth. But if you each have comments, please feel free to chime in at any time. So this first one, so for Pat, would you tell us a little bit how you started in writing and really what fostered your interest in that and how you moved that way?
Yeah. I got kind of a late start. I never really realized I had a writing talent until I was in the Navy back in the late 70s. And by the time I got out of the Navy, I was really focused for the first time on going and becoming a journalist. So when I got out of college, got out of the Navy in 1980, and by that time I had about a year of college credits under my belt from doing college courses afloat, and when we were overseas and stuff. And I had my journalism degree by 1983. I started working at a local newspaper in Oshkosh, Wisconsin back then. Then I went from there, and I worked there about 8 years. And then I went on to be the editor at Deer and Deer Hunting magazine. And like DJ was saying, the magazine industry pretty much has caved in recent years. But back in the 90s, it was still a pretty thriving way to make a living. We weren't getting rich, but there were lots of magazines, lots of competition. And that's one thing I always liked about journalism. It tends to be a competitive trade, and you can kind of chart how you're doing. If you're not competitive, you didn't really do real well usually. And 20 years ago, thereabouts, I started freelancing full time. And I've the last 20 years, it's been amazing to think how fast things changed. And the big takeaway for me though is if you're good at what you do and you work hard at what you do in the journalism field, typically for me, there's always been work. I've always been able to find work. I've never been sitting around twiddling my thumbs. The thing that I really encourage freelancers to do is you seize every opportunity you can get, because you never know what your next job might be. And as long as you're always kind of running around acting like there's a gun to your head, which in many cases is a figuratively speaking gun to your head. That's how I really have done the last 20 years. I've always assumed that there's no job waiting tomorrow, so you better keep lining them up as you go. And it often meant working around the clock, week after week after week. But I've enjoyed my career. I don't have any complaints. The final thing I'll say though real quickly is if when I got out of the Navy, I had the GI Bill, and I made sure I made use of it. I went and used those benefits, and I can't stress that enough. Is you have to take advantage of the various opportunities the military provides you. Don't just let them waste away out there. I took advantage of them, and I've always been happy I did.
Thanks for answering that. So one kind of question off that, Pat, do you think that in the writing career, so say a person leaving service, and if they have no prior undergrad, do you recommend to look at a creative writing or an English or maybe even some of the associated like communications degree programs out there? Is that a good way to start?
Yeah. When I was still in, I would take whatever classes were available, because as an undergrad, in your first couple of years, you're taking a lot of general classes anyway. And I'm not sure how it is today in communications and journalism, but back 40 years ago now, Christ, it's half a century almost. It's amazing to think how fast time's gone. But the thing I liked about journalism was that in college, they really encouraged you to get a really broad perspective. Take a lot of history classes, political science classes, and science classes, and get a really well-rounded education. And for me, it worked out pretty good during my Navy days, because I remember taking political science, psychology. I think I took one English class and one mathematics class. And, there's the basic freshman level type classes. But by the time I got out of the Navy, I already had that full year, it took a year and a half behind me of general classes. And so, and then by that time too, it helped me. The one thing I really will talk about a lot is when I went into the Navy, I really did not have journalism on my mind. But then as I got older and started taking those classes and taking school more seriously, I realized that I wasn't a bad writer, and other people were telling me the same thing. So by the time I came out of the Navy, I was 25 years old and really focused on journalism for the first time in my life. So it wasn't something that for me was a lifelong goal. It was just something that I kind of discovered what other people were seeing before I realized it, and that's how I got focused, I think. So it's I never quit talking about the great experience it was, though, being in the military and in the Navy, and learning basically the hard way a lot of times, that I've been squandering opportunities until I got in the Navy, and that helped me focus. And I'll always be grateful for that opportunity.
Nice. Thank you. So, DJ, sort of similar from you, how did you get into photography and move it in the direction of a career?
I'm the accidental tourist, I guess, really. I have a master's degree in marine biology. I was a failure to launch from that classic. I almost went in the military, but I didn't story. So I always had a very, I guess, understanding and knowledge. I had a lot of friends that were in the service, even early on, friends going into NSW and different places. And I thought that was going to be a career path. And then for whatever reason, I woke up one day and the good Lord said, you're going into biology. So I went heavy marine biology, did a master's in that. And right when I was finishing my master's, I started shooting photos here on the East Coast in North Carolina. And it was kind of the sweet spot of the golden era of surf photography. And it was filmed back then. I'm old, I'm 47. So, no youngin'. So digital was not yet a thing. So I got to learn very rapidly. I kind of applied the science background to a learning curve and figuring out how I was going to approach this. Started shooting photos and then got picked up by Surfing Magazine just because they didn't have a staff photographer on the East Coast. So I got picked up really quickly. And that kind of opened the door to the next 15 years of traveling the world. I think I figured out 55 countries that I did trips to, with multiple trips to a lot of those countries. I was the Brown Water Navy, though. It was a lot of pretty austere locations because they knew I could, with my penchant for paramilitary, I guess, and my background in hunting and fishing, they were like, okay, you get to go to the weird spots. So kind of the trip that opened the door to a lot of my connections in the military space. In 2006, I did a trip to Yemen. I took 3 surfers to Socotra Island in the Gulf there, off the Horn of Africa. We did a 3-week trip, completely off the grid, except for a sat phone and a bag of, that was pre-TCCC. So some pretty basic Marine Corps first aid supplies, and off we went to Yemen, and we did 3 weeks there for the magazine, and that kind of opened the door into the world of Force Recon and JSOC and MARSOC and all that crowd, which ended up leading me to where I am now. So it all starts in Yemen for kind of my weird career trajectory, but that's kind of how I got into it. And I would really, stress, I know I said, print is dead, and there are magazines where it's not. I just, I love working with print magazines. I love seeing art, like a good art director lay out imagery and words and make it beautiful. That's something that you just do not get on the internet or on your phone or wherever. But what I would encourage people to think about, and I live in Wilmington, North Carolina, and randomly I got a phone call years ago from this kid named Lucas Lamb, and I didn't think anything of it. I was like, he's like, hey, I want to be a surf photographer. Will you meet me for coffee? I was like, sure. So we start talking, and he keeps saying little things, and about halfway through it, I stopped him. And this is when I was working for North American. I was like, is Kyle Lamb your dad? And he's like, yeah. It's like, why do you want to be a surf photographer? You have the golden ticket into a world where you have a voice and access that no one else will have because of who your dad is. And that's something I would encourage folks that are looking at transitioning. Really focus on your voice, focus on your connections, focus on who you know. Because in our world now, it's more about the who you know and the access you have than what you know. You can pick up the technical skills, but being able to get along with different folks and working with brands. I mean, Mediator, I work, with people over in your shop on, putting trauma kits out with Ranella and working with the crew on that, and a host of different other venues. And while the magazines might be dead, the brands are not. And now the brands have become, in a lot of cases, the sources, the media powerhouses, whether it's Black Rifle Coffee, Red Bull, Mediator. So there's opportunities to still go after photography and journalism outside of what was available to me when I started. If that makes sense.
Yeah,
so
totally.
that was a rambling answer to your question.
No. It was very solid. So with that, you mentioned when you got into it in the beginning, it was mostly a print industry. And even as things have evolved, how have you grown in that role, and what unique challenges have you seen come from it? From I guess, photography standpoint. Photography
became instant gratification. And what used to be a cover or spread is now an Instagram image that goes away with a swipe, an up swipe, or maybe you get 2 clicks and a like. And that used to be a cover. Like I look at images now coming through my feeds from photographers that blow me away. And I'm just like, this would look so amazing in big format. And here I am just swiping past it on my phone, and it feels dirty. You're like, oh, I know what it took to get that image. I know where the photographer put themselves. I know what they endured to get it, because I've been there, and it just kills me to see it just float by, and and then it's gone. You see it for that one glimpse as you're scrolling through your feed, and then it's gone. And that's sad. But I think for me, the big curve, social media became what, now I'm the minister of propaganda at North American Rescue. They asked me what I wanted to be and what they, I called them one day. I was like, hey, are you guys going to hire me or what? They're like, what are you going to do? I'm like, you're going to need social media, and you need action photography in the military space. I'll do that for you from an action sports background. And they're like, well, what are you going to call yourself? Minister of propaganda. Why, either go big or go home. Why not try? All my marketing director could say was no. So he's like, okay. So to this day, that's what my business cards say. And I do the best I can to, run our feeds in a way that helps the good guys do better things. And that's my litmus test. My lefts and rights. Can we swear on this? My lefts and rights were, from a friend that was a JSOC, where I'm going to let you into the wormhole. Don't fuck up. I was like, wow, that's some pretty big lefts and rights, and I don't want to be disappeared, so I'll try. And I do the best I can to live up to that expectation and try to help the good guys do good things. And I think for me, the moment I can't do that, then it'll be time to move on. But right now, and for the last 8 years, North American's been awesome about letting me pursue that and give a voice to first responders and military and people that are making a difference in the world.
Sweet. Thank you. So Pat, kind of the same question is we've seen the evolution from print to more digital focused. From a writing standpoint, have you seen any unique challenges?
I think that the challenge will always be to, like, one thing I will always stress is that when you do your job, whether you're a writer, photographer, whatever it might be, you better make it your best damn effort every time you submit something. And when you start taking anything for granted, you'll get replaced. And so I really, it does help to know people. But the other thing that you can never take for granted is you never know who's watching. You never know who's reading you. And one of my early lessons in that was just standing back in the back of a newspaper building as the press would roll, and watching all those newspapers come flying out and being carted off into someone's car, and then from there down the street to somebody's house. And sometimes it's being read by people that you'll never hear from them, you never talk to them. But then it might be the mayor reading the article you wrote about City Hall. I've had most of my work over the years, when I look back on from one step to the next, typically it wasn't me reaching out to them. As time went on, it was them reaching out to me because they read something of mine that they liked, and then they read something else of mine they liked, and eventually they thought maybe you should call this guy, and that happens. And so I just always kind of take the approach that if you don't like who you're working for now, just kind of in your mind be thinking that well, then be working for the next person. that person that you don't know right now, be trying to impress all these unknown people out there reading your stuff and looking at your stuff. I just really believe in running scared, and not scared crazy, but scared to where you don't take things for granted, where you wake up every day and you got something to prove. And one of my little things I don't shy away from is that a little insecurity is not a bad thing. It keeps you motivated. And it keeps you looking over your shoulder, because if you're not looking over your shoulder, worrying about your competition and who's might overtake you, you don't stay out in front. And I believe in trying to stay out in front until they catch you, and just hoping that they'll carry me until I someday want to retire. But I'm 66 right now, and I'm still not really feeling the need to retire. I figure when I wake up someday and can't put a sentence together and can't form a thought, well, then I'll know it's time to retire. But until then, I just figure I'm going to keep plugging away, and I still feel like I'm contributing. But I'll be the first one to glom on to someone to give me a hand up, because we all help each other as much as we can. But once somebody helps you, you better make them look good. You know, it's, if somebody reaches out for you and gets you into a job, it gives you an opportunity to work for someone, don't let them down, you know, because it's a double-edged sword. When you take that kind of obligation from someone, you have an obligation to make them look good for suggesting that their employer or their friend, whatever it might be, gives you a chance, and so don't blow it.
So I guess that's a great transition point. And Pat, I'll ask you this first, and then DJ, I'll bounce back to you. But so picture me just coming out of service, and I want to be a writer. I want to be a photographer. What steps can I take, or what recommendations would you have for me to get my work out there, to get it noticed? Is there it doesn't often seem like there's like a tried and true way to do it. Often people are right place, right time, but what may be a good path I could head down?
For me, it all started in college, taking those basic, in my case, was news writing classes and copy editing classes, and mastering the basics of the craft and getting good at those things to where you catch the eye of your professors and instructors. And then in many cases, they can help you find places to write. And the other thing I'll stress is don't give too much of your stuff away. Be trying to look for ways to make money at this. I have a little saying. It's on my desk here somewhere. Yeah, I write down these little things that kind of keep me motivated and keep me focused when I get distracted. But a guy named Samuel Johnson, an Englishman, back in the 1700s, is a Revolutionary War era. He wrote, "No man but a blockhead ever wrote except for money." And I always think if Samuel Johnson knew that in 1770, I should keep that in mind in this era. That doing work for charity, doing things for trade out, where you're just getting maybe some free shit in return. That doesn't you can't stash that. You can't put it in the bank. You can't put it in an investment. So work for money, but again, it's all that networking you do, and then proving yourself every step so that people do want to pay you, and not just basically take charity from you. So that's my advice I can give you: is just work hard at it, make it worth the money they pay you.
Thank you. DJ, over to you. So kind of same question.
Well, just first to follow up on something he said just a second ago, like now, especially, it started out with the newspaper and the speed of print, which, it took a little while to get out there. The feedback you can get on written and photographic work, and good or bad or ugly, on the internet is ruthless. So be prepared for that. Don't let your feelings get too involved, because people will trash you fast. It happens lightning fast. If you screw up and it's on social media, whatever else, there's no getting it back. It is out there, it is gone. So be aware of that. Every word counts, every image counts. So back to the question at hand. For me, kicking off was a lot of knocking on doors. I'm not shy, so I would literally grab a magazine, look at the masthead, look up the phone number for the photo editor or for the magazine office, call them, ask to speak to the photo editor, say, hey, this is who I am, this is where I live, this is what I want to do. How can you help me? How can I help you? And just built relationships. And that was how I kind of started. And I started sending in, back then it was slide sheets. Now you have so many more ways visually to represent what you're doing, whether it's, Instagram or, I look at accounts all the time of, there's photographers in the military, like Corbin Lundberg, incredible photographer who's, combat camera, who shoots incredible stuff outside of that. It's opening all sorts of work for him. And art directors notice that stuff as you build a following and you can showcase your work, whether it's having a website, a blog. There's a million ways to put stuff out there that weren't available when I started because we really didn't have, that wasn't an option. So I think there's lots of ways. I think it comes down to the voice you have, who you want, how you want your imagery, your words, your style, how you want it to be, and be true to yourself. And definitely don't do it just for free, because the surf world was the king. It was the kingdom of the bro deal. Hey, bro, come on, I'll give you a pair of glasses. Just film me a photo. Come on, bro, I'll get you a wetsuit. You're like, oh my gosh, I can't eat a wetsuit. So, stand up for who you are, because if somebody feels like you're just the bro guy that they can just get free stuff, get imagery for free constantly, it's harder to ever work up to a going rate. Like, educate yourself, know what going rates are. So when people ask you, be confident in saying, hey, I command this rate, or, and also understand how it scales to different size companies. I'm not going to ask, a startup company for the same day rate as I would an established company that I'm working with on a commercial business. But you can build relationships, build it so it's a sustainable thing where you can work, over time and exceed expectations. I'm always, any trip I ever went on, any shoot I've ever done, my goal is to overperform, so that when people look back at it, they're like, hey, that guy worked his ass off. He wasn't just, show up, shoot a photo, go dick off all day. Like, everyone's like, oh, you surfed all the best waves in the world. No, I swam in the best waves of the world, taking photos of surfers that worked hard to be there surfing them. I didn't get to go surf them. Flat days I went spearfishing, but if there was a wave, we were shooting photos. So work hard, overperform, just like you would on, any other career. Just because it's a creative space doesn't mean you don't have to work hard.
You both mentioned the networking piece, and you kind of alluded a little bit to each how much the networking piece has played. But would you recommend like any professional associations or certifications or trainings that you've participated in, or any of those out in that space?
Personally, this is just me. I've never had a whole lot of seen a whole lot of work come through the different organizations, at least in the outdoor field. I belong to some of the different professional groups. I actually am president of one in Wisconsin here, but it's more of a news focus. And I'm I hate to echo DJ too much, but it's a matter of being able to pick up the phone. I still believe in the phone a lot. Emails are too easily ignored. Text messages are even getting to be where you should be really, I think you should be careful about texting someone unless you really know them well. Because I think texting gets a little more into, at least for me, maybe because I'm old, but I still feel like it's kind of like if I got someone's cell phone number, I try to protect that person's privacy and respect their privacy and not overburden it too much. But I have no problem though picking up a phone and just saying, leaving a message, if nothing else, identify myself, and then being willing to call back. A lot of this is just persistence and having the confidence that knowing you have something to offer, and not just always waiting. But the other thing too, I'd stress is being flexible. In my career as a writer, I've done everything from writing for the portable restroom industry. It was trade magazines and trade publications all over the place. And if you're a good reporter, a good writer who likes talking to people and getting into why they're doing what they're doing, there's money to be made out there. Just a couple of weeks ago, in fact, I got a good assignment where a woman from Chicago contacted me because her husband had heard me on Meat Eater talking about the fact I used to write obituaries for famous people at the newspaper. When someone died in town who was halfway famous, they'd tell me to write the article because they liked the way I handled those situations. And here I was, all these years later, some woman calls me out of the blue from Chicago and says, my dad died. I don't know how to go about writing an obituary. Would you do it? And so we sat down, figured out a price, and I went to work on it and had it done for in a couple of days. But I just think as a reporter and writer, you got to be willing to work where you can find the work, not just always. I'm not. I don't think I'm your typical outdoor writer. I've always been more interested in making a career out of this, not just going out hunting all the time or fishing all the time. Some guys get into outdoor writing because they want to be fishing all the time. I think, well, that's great. You can go fishing all the time, but you probably won't make a living as a writer then or a reporter at this. So you got to kind of figure out what your long-term goal is in this stuff.
Thanks, Pat. DJ, over to you for the same question. Any trainings, associations, or professional groups that you've been involved in that have kind of helped or could help?
Once again, I'm a little bit of a unicorn. I have no photography background. So I didn't take any photography classes. It was just something I picked up as I went along. I'm a member of the National NAMPA, Nature Photographer of America, or something like that, solely because it allows me to get insurance for my camera gear that covers in water accidents. So there's a reason, but it doesn't help me get work. I think the best thing for getting work is having people know that you show up and work hard, and you'll go the extra mile. I mean, I would always tell my surfers, it only takes one wave and the entire trip's worthwhile. So you don't know when that wave is going to come. And I apply the same thing to other aspects of my career, whether it's we're shooting spearfishing or we're shooting hunting, or it takes that one moment. And if you're sitting on the back porch like I am, or front porch as I am right now, kicking back, drinking a beer, just relaxing, you're not going to capture that moment. So, if you're working, you're working.
I guess to both of you, would a piece of advice, and this is a little bit of a loaded question, I believe, but is if you've got the passion for it, if you think you might have the passion for it, pick up the camera, pick up the pen, keyboard, whatever, and just kind of start working yourself into it. Would that be a fair assessment?
Everyone comes at it from a different path, and that's
sure.
In my case, it was, looking back, it was a pretty steady progression of jobs that eventually led to freelancing. But then I talked to people though, like DJ, who have, I think, God-given talents that you don't always get through schooling. And there's people like me who I think I'm a decent writer, but I have no doubt that college and the journalism programs, the classes I took, helped hone that craft and help me. I still don't know, when people talk about someone finding your voice. I've never really spent a whole lot of time worrying about what the hell my voice is. I just have a way of writing and a way of communicating, and I work at that. And I still go back and read stuff I wrote last week or 10 years ago, whatever it might be, and see weaknesses, see ways I can improve it. And I think it's just a matter of always trying to get better at it. And one of the things I always realized in my work was I was not a photographer. I can shoot pictures. I have some nice cameras, but I don't have the eye. And I just realized that early on that I can. It's kind of like when I liken it to when I was in middle school and taking up band. I played saxophone for like 3 or 4 years. I could play all the notes, but I couldn't play music. And I think that's where the way I look at photography, I can shoot pictures, but I can't. I've never turned it into an art though. Whereas in journalism and the kind of writing I do, I find that by just I really believe in over delivering. And the thing I stress in writing though, that doesn't mean writing a lot more words. It means writing the best words and leaving out all the crap that really shouldn't be there. It's writing tightly and directly, and where people enjoy reading it. That it provides enough information in a entertaining, interesting format that people enjoy reading your stuff.
And so how about for you, DJ? Do you think it's something you would recommend somebody grab a camera and start snapping, or think about it more from a goal perspective?
I mean, it's multifaceted. I mean, exactly what he was saying. I mean, you're always trying to get better. You're never settling with, I think anything in life, at least with the way I view life, if I think I've arrived, then I need to be doing something else. Like, you should always be hungry and always striving to get better. And, on the journalism side, for sure, having my master's degree, getting all that writing experience, writing scientific papers definitely helped. When I'd go write a piece for a trip, having the ability to take constructive criticism. You learn that in graduate school. You learn that in college. You learn when you get a draft back and it's covered in red, it's not the end of the world. For me, it's just a challenge to get better. I wrote a piece for Modern Huntsman last year, and it was the most challenging piece of writing I've ever done because their editor was really good and he pushed me and challenged me to think about writing in ways that I just had never been pushed before. So, you're always learning, always growing. I think, if you feel like, if somebody's coming from a background where maybe they came from a CCT background or, some sort of background where photography was part of their skill set, it's in your toolbox, it's surveillance, whatever, and you like photography, the only way to get better is practice and understanding how to capture different types of things and learn the fundamentals and then apply them. But does that mean you're going to be a professional photographer? No. But even if you don't, but you love photography, do it because you love it. And, if you want to make it your career, then work hard on developing all the other aspects that make you attractive to a brand or some sort of, whether it's online or print publication. Being well-rounded always helps. Being a one-trick pony is not going to get you far, but if you can do lots of other things well, it helps open doors.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Thank you. So, simple answer, it's much more complicated than it seems, which is okay.
To just continue what DJ was saying, one thing I've noticed when I've hung around a couple of meat eater shoots in the last 4 years, watching those guys work for typically they've been their YouTube programs. The thing I noticed about their videographers is those guys never rest. If they're out of the house, out of the car, sometimes even in the car, they never stop. They're always looking for different angles and shooting, this and shooting that, getting other people out of their way. I really, and I wasn't surprised to see how hard they work. I just kind of assume they're working hard, but it's still instructive to watch how hard those guys go at it. And so anyone that thinks they're going to have just a fun time out following some hunter around or fisherman around to get a show together, I tell you, those guys work their ass off, and they just really have creative ways. And then when you see what they produce in the video that shows up on TV eventually, you think, yeah, I was there when he took that picture or took that scene, and I did not see it quite that way. And it's just really impressive to see what those guys can do.
So that leads in, we had a question posted in the chat. Trevor, do you want to read the questions off or would you like me to?
Yeah, I can read them off. This one's actually from me. It's when do you know when you're good at this or not? When you move on to something else? And I had the benefit of having this kind of same talk with Pat over COVID when I decided to start writing, and it's super helpful. And now I've been in 4 or 5 different magazines, and I'm not making a living out of it like Pat, but buys me extra First Light gear and stuff like that. But yeah, just kind of, when do you know photography, writing, like how do you know that how did you know you weren't good at photography, Pat? Like, did somebody tell you, or you're just like, nah, not good? Like, how expand on that?
Part of it, part of it for the photography side, part of it was that in the newspaper world and in the magazine world, I was out there primarily to get the story, to write the story, and it's really hard to do both, at least very well. And so the photography just naturally kind of took a back seat. And then at times though, there'd be times when I'd have to get a good picture, and I'd get one that's passable. And I'll still say I get some stuff that a lot of people think is pretty good. But then, like I say, when I've worked alongside people who I realized have that gift, I really strive to appreciate the talents other people have and not be jealous of them. I have been around a lot of really great photographers in my career. Whether it's Charlie Alsheimer when I was at Deer and Deer Hunting magazine back in the 90s. Then I see some of these guys that Mediator has on staff for the videography. And I just think if you don't respect that, you're a fool. But if you want to get as good as them, you better study what they're doing, how they do it, and ask those questions. And the same goes for writing though. I think for me, I started realizing I was where I proved myself I may be able to do this was when I got back into college and started taking journalism classes, and then getting graded by professors who were typically, there were people who had done that themselves for a while in their careers, and then went into academia later. But yeah, wasn't until I got into the college classroom, competing with other kids in those classrooms, and then going out on internships and night work, and I think a lot of it too is just the desire. I remember I got into sports writing when I was in college, not because I wanted to be a sports writer, but because I wanted the experience of working at a newspaper. So I'd go out and cover football games and basketball games and you name it. If they wanted me to cover something, I'd go cover it, and they didn't pay you much. But it was a great experience to be able to be forced to watch a football game at night, run down to the field afterward, get a couple of quotes from a coach, and then run back to the newspaper office and crank a story out before the 11 o'clock deadline. And that's great training. And so I did it, and I did it a lot. And I sometimes sucked at it because I didn't know a lot of the, I didn't know how to keep a baseball box score, for instance. But I taught myself to at least get functional at it. But I think that's what you gotta be willing to do though, is do some of that nuts and bolts work that most people I find just don't want it that bad. They want it to be easy. And I think if it's ever easy for you, it's like DJ was saying, when you think you're on top of your game, it's probably time to get out. Because I just don't think I've never looked at myself as being on top of my profession or top of my niche, whatever it might be.
That's solid advice, Pat. What about you, DJ? Like, how'd you know you were good?
I would agree with what Pat just said. I mean, I don't ever think you have that initial rush, you get your first photo published and you're like, holy crap, I've arrived, it's first color spread or whatever. And it's exciting and it's fun and it kind of vindicates, you a little bit for all the naysayers. But then you realize you've got to do that over and over again. And it has to be in challenging conditions. And it's not something where it's not, nature is a fickle mistress, she doesn't, every day is different. So what you're going to get is different. How do you respond? How do you evolve? How do you adapt to the situations that you're thrown into? And, you get all these comments, oh, you're a surfing magazine photographer. I just want to come carry your bags. And the reality is, no, you don't. I carry, back in the day, you have 2 Pelican cases and 150 rolls of film and the nightmare of travel around the world to super austere remote locations. I'm like, Yeah, it sounds great and it can look great when you're in these, when you look around you and realize where you are in these remarkable locations. But the reality is you're working your ass off. So I don't, how do you know when you're good? I don't know. That's a question I don't know the answer to. You just do your best. I'm always just trying, like Pat said, just trying to get better, always trying to get better. I'm never satisfied. I can look at stuff now that I shot before and be like, they published that? Like, what were they thinking? So it's a never ending moving target.
I know how that
In my
feels,
opinion.
DJ. I've had a couple things published where I'm like, man, I really wasn't like I'll send 5 articles in, like, and one will be really good. Like, oh, they're going to pick that one. This extra is just to show them I can write other stuff. And they'll always pick one that I was like, I didn't think that was that good, but all right. Kind of feeding into that question. We got a question here from Garrett. How do you know what you are worth when it comes to company branding photos? Like, how do you set your price?
Sorry, I'm kicked out of my house right now because I'm East Coast time, so the kids are running amok in the house. So I'm on the front porch. So I'm trying to find a little better lighting. There's different, I use Photo Shelter as a website that houses a lot of my galleries, because a lot of what I do never sees the light of day, because I'll shoot stuff specifically for military units that is password protected. They use it for storyboards. When PAO doesn't get them what they want, I'm kind of the dirty secret of soft medicine. So I'll go up and help them when they're doing military medical maneuvers off of Fort Bragg, for example, and shoot photos with them. So the great thing about Photo Shelter is it has rate calculators in it. You can utilize those to help you get an idea of what kind of going rates are, and then reach out, ask people, like if somebody's a decent human, yeah, you have every career has assholes in it, right? That are going to want to try to be the big fish in the little pond and not help you out. But the people that are really good at their craft like teaching it. They like sharing stuff, and don't be afraid to ask the questions. Like, ask a photographer, hey, what's your rate sheet look like? I'm thinking about shooting this for XYZ brand. They're asking me to do this, what should that look like? Or that's where I would start with. But there's online rate calculators.
Awesome. Pat, same question. And that's
Yeah,
his writing. Like, I've had articles that come back, they're like, yeah, $250 flat rate. And I'm like, man, this took me like 3 hours. That's
yeah.
that sucks. And then you got another magazine that will come in and be like, yeah, we'd like to pay you $1,200, like in Garden and Gun or something. I'm like, holy shit, $1,200. This is awesome. Like, how do you figure on that, Pat? Like, what's your
Well, it's been interesting for me the last few years that as the internet gets rolling here, I've had people reach out to me on Instagram and ask me to write for them, and I'll ask them, well, can you send me your rate sheet, or what do you pay? And they'll be shocked that I want to get paid. So I've had that extreme. And then but typically, these days I'm not as up on it as I would have been like a decade ago. These days I've been kind of scaling it back to a few groups I like writing for, like Meat Eater and American Hunter and a couple other places that want my stuff. And so I kind of know what their rates are. And then when people contact me and want me to write for something else, I'll ask, what their rates are. And if it's a rate I agree with, or for the word count, whatever it might be, or the topic, however much work it involves. It's really with writing, it can be, I had an article just this week I should mention, for Meat Eater about these world record muskies. And there was a topic about, muskie fishing that I live in Wisconsin. And for 40 years, I pretty much avoided that topic because it's a never ending series of rabbit holes to go down, because there's so much fraud in the like 60, 70 years ago. And there's so many egos in muskie fishing. It's just always this messy area I always wanted to avoid. But then when Meat Eater asked me to write about it, I thought, oh God, there's a reason I've been avoiding this topic. But then I got into it, and I ended up probably not making good money in that article just because it was such an interesting topic. And one thing would lead to another, and I kept wanting to dig until I really understood it, because there's so much history involved. And so sometimes sometimes I do a bad job of setting my price, and that happens. So, and then you make up for it elsewhere. But the one thing I really want to stress to folks is that no matter what you agree to, whatever price you settle on with a company out there that's buying your stuff, you give them your best shot every freaking time. If you start screwing around and saying, well, they're only going to pay me $150 or $250, whatever it might be, so I only give them this amount of effort, you're fucking yourself. You have to go out there and really, make it work. You agreed to that price. When you agree to that price, that's your word. And you better stick with it and deliver it on time and quality work every freaking time. And if you can't handle that, you're really in the wrong. This really isn't the best place to be, because you're always being judged, and sometimes you're being judged harshly and wrongly. But then too, keep in mind who's doing the judging. If it's the person paying your paycheck, pay attention to that. But if it's some joker that you'll never meet in life and never draw a penny from them, don't worry about it. To me, it's like going to Walmart and worrying about some guy 2 aisles over that you'll never see again in your life. Please the people that are paying you and make it worth their while. And the rest of the people, I don't worry too much about those folks who aren't paying my bills.
That's solid advice. We've got a question from Kyle. He says, as someone who struggled in a college writing course and are a little scarred from that episode, I have always been interested in sharing my thoughts. I think I have some good ideas. I'm not looking to make a career, but do you have any advice on how to get started? I know you touched on that earlier, like you're just such an amazing writer. People call you and ask you to write for stuff for them. Like, what about just an average writer? How do they are you just blind calling editors, emailing whoever you can find on LinkedIn and in the back of a magazine, or how would you recommend they get started?
I asking me or asking DJ?
Let's go Pat first, then DJ.
Okay. It is kind of a fun evolution, because I'm not part of the reason I can be picky and choosy now is because I'm basically retirement age. I'm not as hungry as I was even before I was 65. I'm 66 now, but I didn't start slowing down at all in my work until the last year, and I'm still working over 40 hours a week on this. But the thing I'd just tell you is that do the real basic groundwork. Figure out know which places you want to write for. First of all, if you're looking for a place to buy your stuff, well, which websites out there are printing the kind of stuff, publishing the kind of stuff that you like writing? Learn that much at least, and then try to figure out who there do you contact as far as who to send queries to. And that world has changed a lot in my career. I used to be where I'd get queries when I was editing Deer and Deer Hunting magazine 25, 30 years ago, where we'd always get queries sent to us, big long lists of ideas. And the thing I learned was that the guys that come at you with these big long lists, typically they're shipping those lists to every magazine out there. And I wouldn't doubt that there's a format going on today. So the thing I'd really look at is be targeted, find out which publications, which operations you really want to write for. Make that your first step, and then figure out really what kind of stuff are they buying, how long of the article is it. If they're only printing 600-word articles, don't send them 2,000-word articles. They don't want it. Like Meat when I started writing for them, they wanted me writing 800 to 1,000 words. That was the maximum. Then as I got into some of the more involved topics, it just naturally grew into longer articles that pay a little bit more. But it's just a matter of growing with each, learning what your strengths are, and then the editor learning what your strengths are. But don't expect this to happen overnight. It takes years usually. But the thing that's fun about it, though, is those years can go by very fast. If you're working hard, and building a base out there, the longer you stay at it and keep delivering good work on time, it does add up eventually where you establish a reputation. But don't think it's going to happen this week or 6 months from now. It's going to take years sometimes. Because the other thing I'll say real quick to wrap up that thought, one of the first things I learned in journalism is most people don't read bylines. Editors will read bylines, and other people in the publishing world will read bylines, but your day in, day out readers aren't reading bylines. So if you're in this for all ego and shit, ego doesn't pay the bills. Just worry about your getting a good article out there or good photography out there, and then the rest will take care of itself.
Thanks, Pat. DJ, any thoughts? How do you get started? Just emailing folks?
What Pat said, he kind of nailed it there. Yeah, I mean, I think if you're just starting out, developing those relationships, looking at, you don't want to have come to somebody with a million ideas. Come to them with one idea that you're passionate about that trumps a million ideas that you just thought up because you're trying and hoping that one sticks. And I guess, earlier I said finding your voice. That's more of what I'm talking about. It's not just a mythical voice of, Yelp, your great Yelp out in the woods. It's trying to find, what matters to you. What do you want to focus on? So it involves, kind of some introspection and looking at that more than just, hey, this is what I want to give the world, but why do you want to give it? What's your motivation? What's driving you to push in that direction, whether it's in writing or in photography? What unique character of whatever that idea might be can you show people that other people haven't? And sometimes you'll hit an idea and you think it's great, and they're like, yeah, we've done that. And you have to be able to be prepared to move on.
Yes, it's a lot of times, your best idea just isn't hitting someone at the right time. They might have done an article on it, a month before or something. And so I've had article ideas that basically have been kicking around my head for years. And then one day the right opportunity comes along, you finally realize this is a time to spring that one. But it is, it's a constant effort though to keep generating good ideas. But God, I can't stress enough is they should be ideas you care about, not just fill in the blank type shit. But if you're a person with curiosity and you read, and the other thing too, keep reading. Don't just stumble through life. Keep listening. I listen to when I'm doing anything manual, as far as out in the yard doing yard work or hauling crap around somewhere. I'm always listening to podcasts, and I don't just listen to silly podcasts, but I try to listen to stuff with news, stuff with history in it, whatever it might be, stuff that interests me that might just generate ideas for me. So it's just a matter of always staying curious and engaged, and being willing to, in my case, pick up the goddamn phone. And get out of your damn office and go visit someone once in a while that might have a story idea. Because one of my little stories I tell people, I'm not shitting it. It works. If you're a person who goes out and covers meetings and symposiums, I've covered a lot of stuff on deer biology over the years, and some of the best stories I've gotten, whether it's covering a board meeting of a natural resources committee or something like that, or covering a science type program, is just going in the men's room and someone seeing you and saying, hey, they're talking about this, but you might want to look at this instead. And it's just these little casual conversations that you would not get by sitting at home. So it's always, you get out of bed in the morning, you gotta be working. You gotta be working that until you go to bed at night. And I think, as I said earlier, I might sound like this insecure little weasel, but I kind of am. I always think that if you're not always worrying about what's your next assignment you won't stay motivated. So I have a little thing. I think about that race at sunrise. You get up in the morning and you're try to kick ass until you get up bed every night. And if you don't have that motivation, it's going to be a very hard time making it as a freelancer.
Thanks, Pat. We're right at the buzzer here. Open it up to the floor. Does anybody got any other questions that we maybe missed or anything you want them to touch on real quick? Going once.
Can I add one quick thing to what Pat just said?
Yeah, go for it.
I think it's real important for veterans transitioning to realize that the civilian workplace is a different monster than being in the military. So you have to have a different, like your set of expectations and people's delivery on those expectations is going to be different than in your military space. Sadly, in the civilian world, if somebody says they're going to be somewhere at a certain time, oftentimes they're not. But you'll stand out if you are that person.
Did we lose?
Yeah, if I can add to that,
yeah, Pat.
That's one thing I think it helped me a lot. I think in my life is that I had that military background and the idea of being accountable all the time. And people, I think people respect that. They might not have been in the military themselves, but they start to see that you're a little bit different than the other people around you. I think a lot of it is because of that accountability factor. And I always think of these little things I served in the peacetime Navy, so it wasn't like we were living like some of the guys have in the last 20 years, last 25 years. But the thing that you learn when you're being drilled on stuff all the time and damage control, the kind of stuff I was in, is how big a difference it can make if you're just 10 seconds late for something, not being there where you're supposed to be at a specific time. And I think that accountability, that counts for something. People recognize that, and I've always liked hanging around military people because I think we kind of start looking at the world the same way. But yeah, the civilian world is not like that at all. I mean, at least compared to my experience. But then in some ways, I feel like the military though gave me a step up that other people don't have. So I find it, I can't always put it in specific terms and tie it back to a specific case, from my background, but I do know that a lot of it is that the old right way, wrong way, Navy way. And I do a lot of my work that way still. The other term I always remember was the attack arrow. For these 15 minutes, this is what we're focused on. And you don't worry about anything else during those 15 minutes. And in journalism, a lot of that work is that way. You got to sit down and crank out a story in a half hour to 45 minutes. And if you're not a person who can focus and then write with, on deadline, it's not easy. So, and I could talk about this kind of stuff all night because it really was, to me, a very formative part of my life, those 5 years I spent in the Navy.
Yeah. Pat, you got, how would people get in contact with you if they have further questions? Is Instagram best? You got a LinkedIn? I know you have a website. What do you think?
Yeah, I have a website, Patrick Durkin Outdoors. I'm also on LinkedIn, just Patrick Durkin Outdoors, and Facebook, Patrick Durkin Outdoors. I try to keep it consistent across the platform. I'm easy to reach because I keep my email on there. I think I even have my phone number on my website. And I really do try to help folks when I can. I can't always help everyone, but the last little thing I'll say too is, this idea when you get around some artsy fartsy types, they act like it's a matter of waiting for the muse to strike. And I always remember this great writer, of course I'll forget her name now because I'm on the spot, but she had this great line about she doesn't know when the muse will strike, but she knows if she's not sitting at her desk when it strikes, it won't matter, and I think that's kind of the way I am. I look at that as, it's nice to have, that idea that you're going to get inspired, but nothing inspires you more than having a paycheck, and you don't get paychecks unless you're sitting here, at your keyboard working. So that's my big advice.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Pat. DJ, you still with us?
Yes, sir. Still here.
Awesome. You got want to expand on that last minute advice? I know you kind of got cut off there for a second.
Oh no, Pat picked up right where I left off and crushed it. So no, I mean, really, it's just a matter of, exceed expectations wherever you are. Work hard, work harder than the next guy, and you often get invited back. So that's kind of been, whatever I do, that's how I try to live it. So yeah, nothing too profound here. I'm probably still a little oxygen deprived from holding my breath all day, so bear with me.
Oh, that's all right, man. We appreciate you both coming out. If nobody's got any other questions, we're going to do the attendance prize. If you haven't been to any of the others, I basically turned this on the Brady Bunch mode. And at the beginning of the meeting, I had Andy, one of our volunteers, send me a random number between 1 and 16. Tonight's winner is number 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That is Mr. Vargas. Vargas, if you could put my email is in the top of the chat, just hubs@backcountryhunters.org. Pick something out, pick a couple things out on the BHA store, and send me your sizes, and I'll get them shipped out to you, man. Congratulations. Thanks for coming. You'd give us a verbal thumbs up. I'm going to pick another one if you don't.
Thanks. Got it.
All right, cool. Sounds good, guys. Hey, appreciate everybody coming. Thanks for showing up. We've got one more next week. Next week's class is all about working in the conservation industry. So biology, Texas game wardens coming on. We've got people from Washington State. But yeah, if you want to be a biologist, you want to be a game warden or conservation officer, next week, same bad time, same bad channel. Thanks everybody for coming.
Thanks
Thanks
for having me.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers.